It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Hey, welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I am so excited to be here. I'm with my co-host, Rick. Rick, how are you, my friend?
Doing fantastic, Paul. Great to be here. Great to see you again.
Oh, it is good to see you. I always enjoy, and I love the swag, man.
Yeah?
Look at that. We got it going today.
This just showed up at my house. I don't even know how it got here. It was amazing.
That's cool. Yeah,
how do they even know?
Yeah, some logistics issues. We've been wanting to get this thing out for a couple months, and I finally got produced. I'm super excited about it. Thanks for the recommendation. Queensboro is a fantastic, and no endorsements here per se. They're not a sponsor of our show, but maybe they should be because they made this amazing swag for us today. So appreciate Queensboro and everything that they do and your recommendation to use them. But man, we've got a great topic to talk about today. And
absolutely.
Why don't you share with everybody what we're going to talk about?
Well, today we're going to talk about the how-to series, continuing the how-to series, but it's going to be around resilience. So weird how we title it. Maybe it's how to overcome resistance or how to be resilient. But either way, really resilience is our topic for today.
Yeah, how to be resilient. I'm not going to lie, Rick. You know, when you and I we exchange thoughts like, okay, what do we want to talk about? This one is really an important area for me right now. We're going through some challenges family-wise, you know, with my father-in-law, and really a decline health-wise, and hopeful that he'll make it through. And but just trying to work through some stuff. And you know, there's never not a need to be resilient. There's never not a need to be resilient. And we might think we're on top of a valley, or top of a mountain, and we're looking down on that valley, and we're thinking we're there. But let's face it, we're going to face some potholes and some valleys ourselves, and some streams that we got to cross, and we got to be resilient. So let's dive in on this. I think it's so important for us to talk about how we can be more resilient. And you talked about resistance. Talk about those two words. You shared something good before we hit the record button that I think is really important.
Well, I mean, yeah. So resistance and resilience to me goes together in the sense that resilience is the ability to overcome resistance, and resistance is going to be everywhere, no matter what we do. There's never a time where we're on the top of a mountain, Paul. That's such that thought itself. Like, you get to this point, like, no matter what, every day something's going to come my way, and it's whether or not I have the resilience to overcome that. But it's never not going to come. It's ever not. You know, I love when people sit there and say, you know, why does this always happen to me? No, it always happens to everybody.
That's right.
Everybody. Yeah. Everybody has somebody that is in a health decline, or is that, you know what I mean? And there's varying levels, of course, please. But to each person's life, there is something that is resistant every single day to them. It's just how you choose to deal with that. And it's funny because, you know, one of the stories that I have around that is, you know, around the whole theory of no day but today for me. And so, just a super long story short, when I lost my dad at 19, it was a devastating time for me. And I got into a lot of negative behaviors around that. And I remember at the funeral, my mom played a Garth Brooks song, "If Tomorrow Never Comes." And I was infuriated by the song. Understand why you play it at a funeral, but at the same time, like, tomorrow's not coming for my dad. So, like, why are we even playing this song? And I started to almost kind of live my life as if tomorrow would never come. Really horrible decisions, a lot of stuff. I get invited to go see a play. Joey Fatone is sitting in for Anthony Rapp in a play called Rent. Don't know anything about the play. Don't know anything. Go see this play, and there's an amazing affirmation that's said throughout the play. And it says, "There's only us, there's only this. Forget regret, or life is yours to miss. No other path, no other way, no day but today." And there was a mental shift in my brain there, Paul, that going from if tomorrow never comes to, well, there's no day but today, right? It's a subtle shift, but it's almost that negative to positive. I remember going to Joey Fatone. I was like, I need to meet the guy who wrote this. Like, where's Jonathan Larson? And he's like, you can't. I was like, why? He's like, well, he passed away. So again, another super long story short, I started to research Jonathan Larson. His entire goal, his entire life, all he wanted to do was to have a positive review in the New York Times and have a play on Broadway. And if you ever met Jonathan face to face and asked him, you know, hey, what do you do? He literally would tell you in a very pretentious way. He would go, I'm going to change the face of the rock musical and Broadway forever. Straight up just said that. And like, and you're like, cool, I'm Rick. You know what I mean? Like, that's how he would introduce himself at a party. And that's exactly what he did. He actually started the lottery system. He did music in a new way that had never been done on Broadway before. And they were doing a dress rehearsal. And he's actually interviewing with the New York Times. And Anthony Rapp writes this in a book called Without You, that Anthony was going to go say goodbye to him and say, you know, I'm so excited for, you know, tomorrow's opening night, essentially, or it's friends and family night, not quite the opening, but and he was interviewing with the New York Times. So he said he would just catch Jonathan tomorrow. And that night, Jonathan's heart burst and he passed away. He never got to see the review in the New York Times, and he never got to see the play officially open. And it, you know, here it is 25, 26 years later, and it's still a blockbuster play. It's changed the lives of so many people. Yeah. So I'd say all that because then all of a sudden I was like, man, this is a story I need to tell. Like, this is a story I felt like I have such a connection to, I want to tell. So that festered with me for quite some time. Now I'm speaking, you know, it's a couple of years later, I've got some books out, you know, my life has turned around, career's going well. And I'm listening to the soundtrack of Rent on a plane on the way to go speak in New Jersey. And as I look out to my right side, I see New York City. And I'm like, wow, like maybe now's the time to really start thinking about No Day But Today. And as we land, I pull up the Life Cafe, which is in the play and is where Jonathan wrote most of it. And I'm literally like 20 minutes away from it, Paul, from the Life Cafe. And I'm like, dude, the signs are like lining up, right? Like all of a sudden there's this great momentum. So I already had to rent a car because I was going to go speak in New Jersey that night. And I had like 4 hours. I go to the Life Cafe, I meet the owner. I sit in the bench that Jonathan wrote in, and literally I still have the picture of the Jonathan Larson bench there at the Life Cafe. And there they have something called the rent head registers. And so people would come to the Life Cafe after the show on Broadway. And these were just journals that people could write like what the play meant to them and what everything meant. And just reading these, you just get so inspired. And so I was like, I have to tell this story. Like I have to, this is going to be the thing. So I remember driving to a Kinko's before my speech, found Jonathan Larson's family, the Family Foundation, all this stuff, wrote a letter and mailed it from the Kinko's. Like I couldn't wait. And I was asking for the rights of No Day But Today to be able to play in a series of seminars. I announced the business plan, how I would put money into the Marfan Foundation. Like I was so pumped, dude, and gave one of my best speeches of my life, right? Because I was on such cloud nine, right? Like I had so much momentum. And I got a letter back from an attorney that said I couldn't have the rights, and it just crushed me. And that was the resistance right there that just said, and you know what? At the time, Paul, I let that be the ultimate end. And I did. I let that kill the dream. And we'll stop there and let you do some comments there. Maybe we'll come back to it. But right there is that resistance that came and killed that whole thought for that moment.
No, this is a phenomenal story because, we hit the brick walls, right? There was a great, really communicator. I think he was a pioneer, wrote a book. Actually, a book was written called The Last Lecture. Randy Pausch. You ever heard of Randy Pausch?
I've heard of Randy, but I haven't read that book.
It's a great book. I had a chance to meet Randy Pausch in 2000 when we were just launching our business and just spending the weekend with him. Actually, we spent part of Thursday, Friday, not really Saturday, but that all of Friday. I was there all the way until Sunday, but we were meeting with different folks. And so for a day and a half, I met with Randy. And this is well before his passing. He died of pancreatic cancer. But if you ever get a chance, you can read the book or you can go online, and there's a YouTube video called The Last Lecture. And I think it's subtitled Living Your Childhood Dreams. And he's got some great thoughts on there. And he's talking about resilience. And he says, the brick walls are there to see how much you really want it, and you hit a brick wall. I've hit brick walls. And here's the truth, guys. When I've hit brick walls, I've stopped. I've just pulled back. I'm like, well, I guess it's not meant to be. It is what it is, right? How many times do we say that phrase? It is what it is. And we stop and we don't move forward. And I started to believe that it wasn't, and there's different examples here. In your example here, you stopped. You didn't leverage that song. And then I know you got more to the story that you're going to share in a little bit. But when I hit resistance, I stop. And I think that's it. There's no way to go forward. But the realization is, wait a minute, maybe there is something here. Maybe I can get over it. Maybe I just need to go around it, go over top of it, get through it somehow. And I'm learning to do that now, Rick. I'm learning to realize that the resistance that I experience, which I experience every single day. I mean, I could do a journal of just resistance I felt today, right? We all have it. We all could create that list of resistance I had today thing. But if we can just be aware, like, wait a minute, there's still another path through this. That gives us encouragement, because we will find that other way. And when we find that other way, it gives us a little bit more momentum to get through the next wall that we have to face. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about. Like, all right. In fact, I remember, quick story. I'm in high school and I had almost forgotten this story until I started facing resistance as an adult. But I remember I was a hurdler and I wanted to just get better at it. But I got frustrated every time I skimmed the top of the hurdle. And I was like, and I just try to jump higher, right? Well, you're not really supposed to jump when you hurdle. You stride, you take your leg over. And so one of the guys came to me and says, Paul, I see you're really trying to clear that hurdle. That's great, but that's not what you need to do. It's okay if you skim that hurdle. The resistance is there to let you know you're heading in the right direction, and that's so true. And I've just kind of used that line now ever since then. If you don't experience resistance, then you're not heading in the right direction. You need to know, hey, look, if you got some, hey, that's probably means that you're on the right path. So keep going with your story.
Well, I think it also means, though, Paul, if we tie this into, I attribute it to Dr. Rome. I'm sure it comes from somewhere else, but we talk about the universe gives you the same, you get these tests and they're pass and fail. And if you fail, you're going to get the test again until you have that ability to pass, right? So if you ever say the thing like, why does this always happen to me? Or I'm always in the same exact spot, it means we haven't learned those lessons to be able to go through. And maybe resilience is the marker that you had that ability, or that you're ready to overcome that specific resistance. So the fact that I let that letter shut down the dream without any kind of checking or any other kind of thoughts, I wasn't ready to tell the story. I may have had a great idea, but I didn't have the resilience muscle to overcome that specific resistance, because universally or energy wise, I just wasn't ready to tell that story. I maybe not had lived. And so to continue with the story, now it's like 2014, and I'm coming through the near bankruptcy, and the music career and that kind of stuff. What was interesting about the music career, though, what I found out as I was, loading the rights of the artists and these albums, is that I didn't even need to ask the family for the rights to the song. There's actually an organization out there that if I want to use any portion of any song in a video or a conference or anything, I can write to them and say, this is what I want to do. This is how much of the song I'm going to use. This is how many people will be there. And they'll turn around and say, if you do that, here's the amount that you pay. And then it's an honor system that if I go do that I pay them, then I have the rights to be able to do so. So I didn't even need to write the family. I asked the wrong question, but I didn't have the resilience. And even then I said, this near bankruptcy that I just came through is really this new resilience marker that I'm coming over. Maybe I had to go through that in order to be able to tell the story. Because I was sitting in Maxwell, which, when we did when I joined the Maxwell team was just right after this near bankruptcy. And what I heard in a session there to me was, you weren't ready to write the book, but you are now. And that was that kind of piece. But even then, Paul, I wasn't still not ready. Still not ready. So I mean, the book's out, we did it, but it's not what I wanted it to be. And so there's still an opportunity for me to overcome that resistance, because I can sit there and go, well, it's out, it's not the best work, whatever. Or I can pull it off the shelf and do it the way that I intend to. And so it's just, where's that resilience factor going to be next?
Yeah. And I think it's the message of the book, like seizing the moment that we have in front of us. I think that's such a critical message, and it fits perfectly with our discussion on resilience. So when, we think about yesterday and we think about all the things that might have held us back, and we might think about tomorrow, and maybe that creates some fear, some anxiety in us. Well, yesterday is history. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet. We have today, right now, today. And so no matter whatever resistance we're experiencing, maybe we can have the resilience just to kind of work through the day and see what kind of impact we can make, one step at a time. So have you ever seen What About Bob, the movie?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Classic movie, right? So I love that. Richard Dreyfuss is one of the characters in there, and he I guess he's a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm not sure which field he's in, but one of those two. And he's written this book called Baby Steps. And then Bill Murray is the main character. He's Bob, right? So he's having some anxiety issues. And but Richard Dreyfuss, the character, he just wants to go on vacation, and well, he plants a seed inside of Bill Murray that I think is pretty powerful, and it's powerful for all of us. And he says, look, Bob, I got to go on vacation, but here, start reading this. It's his brand new book. It's about to come out, Baby Steps. And he says, it's about baby steps, one step at a time. And for Bill Murray's character, Bob, it's just like this, moment of inspiration, like, oh, baby steps, take one step at a time. And it sounds so trivial, but it is so true. Of course, as we know in that movie, Bob goes up there to find Richard Dreyfuss's character, and it's just funny. It's a hoot. It's a great movie to watch. But I love the resilience part of that story, the resistance that he experiences, but the resilience that he has to go through it. And it's really kind of a metaphor for all of us. Like, we're going to have those what about Bob type of moments, and we just need to make those steps and work through it. So, but yeah, like I said, there's a lot of funny scenes in that movie.
Yeah, I think, the parallel that we're pulling here is that resistance is the test of your resilience for your dream. That's really it. So to your point that you said earlier, if you're not feeling any resistance, then you're not going down the right path in the first place.
Yeah.
And then pulling my story through, if the resistance is more than the resilience that you have, then you're not ready to overcome it. And so resilience is just that ability to overcome that resistance that's there, but those two work together.
Yeah.
Right. So the resistance is there to test your dream, and the resilience is there to see if you have enough of it to overcome the resistance that's there. Like that's really what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's great. It's a good comment. So let's talk about this, right? So every day is a new day. What are the things that folks can do? And maybe this gets a little early to our tip and challenge, but I just want to ask the question. What are some things that folks can do to build their resilience muscle, to get themselves ready, right? Prepare themselves for the day ahead.
Let me pull this in, because to me, it's I think the first step, just like anything, like if you have a problem with anything, the first step is identifying the problem, right? It's announcing that you have a problem and identifying the problem. So in this case, I think what would be the first step of resilience is identifying the areas of resistance and being prepared that resistance is going to be coming. So there's a beautiful book called The War of Art. Pressfield wrote it. Yeah. And in there, it's Resistance Greatest Hits. And let me just read a couple of these real quick. He says, the following is a list in no particular order of those activities that most commonly elicit resistance. Says the pursuit of any calling in writing, painting, music, film, dance, or any creative art however marginal or unconventional, the launching of any entrepreneurial venture or enterprise for profit or otherwise, any diet or health regimen, any program of spiritual advancement, any activity whose aim is tighter abdominals. And he goes on, but the last he says, in other words, any act that rejects immediate gratification in favor of long-term growth, health, or integrity, or expressed another way, any act that derives from a higher nature instead of our lower nature, any of these will elicit resistance. So that essentially means, and I think that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's a great book, super easy to read. But the point is that anytime you have, and I love the way he put that higher purpose versus the lower, right? The lower purpose is the instant gratification. That's, oh, the donut's there, I want the donut, right? That's that instant gratification versus the rejecting of that, because you have that longer term of being healthy and well. I saw a thing yesterday on Facebook too, where they talked about diet versus health. And what they did is they put a circle around the words DIE in diet. So die. And then in health, they put a circle around HEAL. So heal. And it was about the mentality. So diet is restrictive, whereas health is, choosing better things, right? And diet is withholding, where health is building, right? So I just thought it was really interesting when you start to put things through that, but it's the same thing. I'm educating yourself on resilience. The first thing you do is to expect and understand that resistance is going to come. And so the question is not, it's almost like when we do project management, we talk about risk. And when you put a plan together and you then turn around and ask people, what do you think can go wrong with this plan? They can't come up with anything, Paul, because they just thought of it and it's going to work. There's optimism there. And when you start going, well, how is that going to fall apart? They literally they can't. So I've had to learn techniques of how to poke holes into that so we can start to build a resilience bank to overcome the resistance that I know is coming in any project, any endeavor, no matter what happens, we're going to have resistance. So I think the first step of resilience is to be able to identify the resistance and to start to build the resilience bank so that we know, like, what are we going to do when they tell me no? What are they going to do when somebody slams a door in my face? What are we going to do if I can't find somebody for this job? Whatever that is.
Yeah, I like that. Just kind of thinking ahead of time. Rick's point is solid. When you sit down and you think about all the things, identify the resistance. I love that. When you think about the resistance that you have, or the resistance that you might have, maybe you haven't experienced it yet, but you look at like, well, here's what I want to accomplish today. And I always like to start with that question. I try to answer 3 questions every morning. What are the 3 things I want to accomplish? So I'll write them down. Like, oh, I want to get this done, this done. And then if I do a little bit more further study, it comes down to that question. Well, what's the resistance I'm going to have to try to get that done? And if I don't go through that process of identifying the potential resistance that I might experience, then the first time I face the resistance, I stop. I'm like, well, it's not going to happen. But if I take time to say, okay, I know what I want to accomplish. I know the potential roadblocks I'm going to hit. Maybe I don't know them all, but at least if I've identified 1 or 2, then I can start to address that ahead of time in my mind. Like, okay, if this challenge comes against me, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to step back. I'm going to swallow hard. I'm just going to come a different tack. I'm going to do this. I'm going to answer it this way. It depends upon what that resistance is that we identify. But I think you can predetermine ahead of time. Dan Pink talks about this as a pre-mortem, right? Do the pre-mortem. Most people do post-mortems at the end of an event of a project, and they go back and look at all the things that went wrong. Well, what if you could look at things ahead of time before you actually go pursue that project or make that trip or do whatever endeavor it is? And you look at all the potential things that might go wrong, not to scare yourself and stop you from out of the gates, but just to say, okay, I know I'm going to experience Murphy, right? Murphy's law. Murphy's going to come. Resistance is going to happen. Here's what I'm going to do when this happens. It's okay. I've been through this before, right? So now what we start doing, I think this is really important. Your past performance, your experience, that evaluated experience, the fact that you're here today means you've gone somewhere. You've traveled to that point of where you are in your life today. You've had some accomplishment. And if you can take those gains that you already have this is a gaps versus gains question. If you can evaluate the gains that you have, that'll give you the momentum and maintain the hope that you probably need, that maybe you thought you're lost when you felt that resistance. Look for that hope, look at the gains that you have, and then step forward. And I think that's one way. That's one approach that I have. Any thoughts on that?
I love that approach. I think the other step to that is identifying the why behind the resistance itself. So for instance, I counsel a lot of people that tell me they don't have time to do this, they don't have time to do that. And those are excuses to allow the resistance to win. It's as simple as that. And I don't want to boil it down, but that's really what it is. When somebody says, well, I want to do this, but this keeps happening, right? It really becomes a very simple question. Then why don't you stop that from happening then? And they go, well, you don't understand because, this happened, these people come up and I get interrupted and I've got to do this and I've got to do that and I've got to do that. And they're right. We don't understand. But the question you have to ask is, why do you allow that resistance to win? Because it probably means you really don't want to do what it is that you say you want to do. Right. So there's that overcoming want or need that builds that resistance or that resilience to overcome the resistance. And basically what it's saying is that desire to accomplish that task is not greater than the desire to allow resistance to win.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because honestly, if I want to shut my phone off for an hour so I can write, all it takes me is to shut off the phone. But if I go, oh no, but it could be work, it could be this, it could be that. And, I've got to be available. Okay. So what I'm saying is that resistance is greater than my resilience to accomplish this task. And that's okay. Right. That's not a right or wrong, or you're a good person, bad person, whatever. That tells me that dream or that task is not as important to me as I deem it to be right now.
Yeah, this is good. I'm writing down some great stuff, guys, and I hope you guys are capturing too, whether you're listening or watching on this podcast. Rick, here's what I wrote. I wrote, excuses become our greatest factor to resistance. You're absolutely right. We can come up with an excuse any time of day in terms of why we didn't get this accomplished, why we didn't move forward with something, because we're going to face different elements of it. And as soon as we hit that wall of resistance, we turn it into an excuse. Well, I guess it wasn't meant to be. And then we add to it like, well, it just didn't work out. I'm sorry. There's 1,000 different excuses that we have, and excuses never allow us to get to the point of where we could go. Nobody who's ever achieved anything got there by making excuses. Nobody. So maybe I need to stop making excuses and start looking for opportunities, be able to encourage myself, encourage others. So I'm going to exchange excuses for encouragement. And this whole idea of desire, right? I think desire, what is it? The why question that you asked about is so important. Well, why is it that you want this again? Look at the positive element. Don't look always at why you didn't do it, but why is it that you want it? What is your desire? I think if we start looking at desire, then we're like, you know what? Okay, yeah, this is really important to me. I'm going to find a way to do it. Even if I have to pivot and find different paths to get through the barriers that I have, the brick walls that are there. This is important. We're going to find a way to do this because it's down to your why question, because I care about those around me. I care about what we're doing here. I care about this project. I care about, this community. These are the kind of questions that we need to ask ourselves. What's our why?
It's huge. And that leads into, I think, a perfect area of tip and challenge. So do you have a tip and challenge around resilience, Paul?
Well, I do. I there's a bunch here that's flying through my mind. I wanted to tell this quick story. Go for it.
Yep.
And this will tie in the tip and challenge. My oldest son, was diagnosed with cerebral palsy when he was less than 2 years old. And it was devastating for me as a father. And he needs to tell that story. I mean, it's a powerful story. So I'm not trying to tell my son's story, but I'm telling you from my perspective as a father. And it was devastating for me because, oldest son, first son, and you have aspirations for that first son, and to see that and to get the resistance that we had from medical staff at the very beginning saying you shouldn't, I wouldn't, no, shelter him at home, don't put him in competitive sports, he might get embarrassed, so forth and so on. Don't expect him to ride a bike. I mean, all sorts of stuff. Excuses were being put out before we even had a chance to do anything at all. Legitimate medical excuses. Well, here's the thing. Michael had he just like any boy, he had an imagination. He had an aspiration. And no medical doctor in a white lab coat, it didn't mean much to him. What he wanted is what he thought about, what he aspired for. And he found a way. I remember one time, Rick, I'll just kind of quickly share this. I pull into the driveway after work, and there's Michael riding around on his bicycle, which wasn't anything new. I mean, he had a bike with training wheels on it, and he'd been trying to ride it. But what was different was he's smiling and he's yelling, "Hey, Dad, look at me." And he's riding around. And I'm like, whoa, this is different. He's just smooth as all. There's no gait issues. He looks great. Oh, there's no training wheels. He went and he took his own training wheels off the bike and he learned to ride that bike. And he fit in just like any other kid.
That's awesome.
And I'm telling you, don't let somebody else's excuses for you keep you from going where you need to go. Just step forward. Find the faith, find that hope, find that desire, and step forward, and you'll learn to ride the bike. That's my tip and challenge.
That's huge, dude. That's huge. I don't know. I should have gone first and not follow that story for sure. It's a tough story to overcome. I think my tip and challenge is going to sound a little bit harsh, but I've heard it this way, and I thought it was really good but a really good activity to put things into perspective. So if you have that goal or dream or whatever that resistance is, again, I just did this with somebody I coach. We were talking about, something that he wanted to get done. And I said, well, what is it that's holding you back? Well, this, and this. And so we wrote them all down. And I said, so tell me everything you don't have time for right now, or what's taking your time.
Yeah.
And we use that word time. Like, I don't have time. I don't have time to spend with my kids. I don't have time to cook dinner for the family like I want to. And I don't have time to go work out, and I don't have time, right? All those different things. And I said, okay, now we're going to change this. And this is a common tactic out there, but you take away the words, I don't have time, and say, it's not a priority to me. Right. And when you change that, it's not a priority to me to work out. It's not a priority to me to spend time with my kids. It's not a priority to me to cook dinner for my family. That changes the meaning, because it is what you're saying. What you're saying is, I don't have time for this. What you're saying is something else has a greater priority than that.
Yeah.
And you've allowed that. First of all, gang, you are the one that's allowing the disruption of your schedule 1,000%. If you don't like your schedule, you don't like the way your day runs, you don't like the way that you get interrupted, you don't like the way that things come at you, you are 1,000% responsible for that. I'm just saying 1,000% that you could learn to start to put up boundaries, to start, stepping into those spaces. It's just not a priority to you right now. And that's okay. That's not a judgment. I'm not saying that you're a bad person for that, but I want you to recognize that that's the choice you've made. Nobody's done this to you. You've made the choice that you're not going to overcome that resistance, and you're not going to have the resilience today to do that. And that's okay. But just recognize that, because that's your marker for whether or not your resilience is going to grow, or whether or not that task ever will have the priority to overcome it. And that's my tip and challenge, Paul.
Dude, that's awesome. That is awesome. I love the flip of that, seeing it from a different light. Guys, hey, look, we want to invite you to go to our webpage, breakingaverage.com. We've got some resources there. We've got all the past podcasts that we've done, both audio and video. You can probably get access to that. We would love to hear from you. And please, share about our podcast. We want you to encourage other folks, and maybe our podcast, maybe this discussion on resilience and facing resistance, maybe that's something that somebody else needs as well. And we're sensitive to what's happening in our world right now, with everything that's happening. we need resilience more than ever. And we would love to hear from you. How did this discussion today really help you and serve you? And let us know what we can do to offer more help and other how-to tips. I love this how-to series we're doing, Rick. It's pretty fun. So I appreciate it. But I really like your message, Rick. There's no day but today. We have opportunities every day. So let's seize on that. So I'll let you close us out, man. But this has been a great discussion. I enjoyed it.
No, I always appreciate these talks with you, and it gives us that perspective. Overcoming resistance and building resilience is a daily battle. And some days you win, some days you lose, team, and that's okay, right? But if we can start to recognize that, then we can start to grow from there. And that, quite frankly, is how you break average, because average people let resistance win every single day. And those that break average build a resilience bank in which they can overcome it. So find out some more tips on how you can break average right here next week. We'll talk to you soon, team.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R² Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.